about what's going on. The problem is, how do you be knowledgeable about what's going on when your educational system is corrupting our kids and our thought? Secondly, you look at the outlets. You mentioned, I think, Rush Limbaugh and Mark Levin and others who I listen to. But who's controlling the news? ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, CNN, MSNBC, and others. That doesn't count the newspapers, particularly if you look at the donors of the Raleigh News and Observer and Charlotte and other people. They're so one-sided. How do you have an intelligent voting public? How do you get to them? You can't. The things are so one-sided that the opposition is not being heard. One last thing, I'll shut up, but I drove 2 hours to say this. Congress, particularly, I voted Republican, is corrupt to the core. You take the leadership, they're undermining every conservative there is, so we can't change it unless we have Article 5, and one thing that should go into Article 5 is term limits. And that considers the judgeship.
I'm sorry, I really, please, it's just a question, and both sides want to respond. Please.
I'm sorry.
So, I don't know what that question was, you want to respond for a minute?
I'm going to interject just a little bit. I'm not on the panel, sorry about that, but it answers somewhat from my point of view as a grandfather, a father. The thing of it is, I go back to we the people. I have to teach my children and my grandchildren the truth and not let the public school override them. And unless we get to the young people, unless we educate them, unless we get them turned around, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's still up to we the people. If we're not involved, nothing gets done. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry. This is what I call a Jesus on the cross moment. And I did a presentation, and after the presentation, this gentleman asked me, he said, well, Mr. Price, it seems like what you're telling me is none of the politicians follow their oath of office. Who's supposed to enforce that? And I said, we are. And he said, but we won't do it. It's a Jesus on the cross moment. When he's on the cross, one guy says, mocks him. And the other guy says, Lord, I acknowledge you. Please forgive me, right? That's where we're at now. And what you're asking is, if you don't acknowledge God, what's going to happen to you? You're going to hell. That's what's going to happen. If we don't do our responsibility, acknowledge our responsibility, and act on it, we're going to hell. It may be unpleasant for us to do what we need to do, but that's our job. And we are in a bad situation now because we sat on our butt and let it get bad. And it's our job, even under Christian principles, to correct it. That's what it is. My son was at a Boy Scout seminar, and the guy on the Constitution, the guy said the government's number one priority is to protect the people. And his hand goes up. I go, oh my God, here it goes. And he said, sir, that's wrong. Their job is to protect our rights, because we become slaves when they protect our people. He didn't learn that in school.
Thanks.
Quick response. I won't take a full minute. Corruption is nonpartisan. It has nothing to do with the R or a D. It has nothing to do with your race or your creed. It has nothing to do with your gender. The only common denominator between corruption and politicians is length of service, and that's why we need to.
Yeah, respond to that.
If they got time. So you got more time.
No, I was pointing to the lady in the back.
Well, Mama, I speak enough, I probably don't need that done.
If you would,
They may not take that.
it's being recorded.
Mine is really a two-part question. Is if we're going to have a convention of states, can we not keep it to one amendment to just enforce the enumerated, 17 delegated enumerated powers in the U.S. Constitution? And what are we going to do for punishment if they don't?
I mean, in terms of the convention, we firmly believe that we should leave the drafting of the amendments up to the state legislatures at the time of the convention, because they will know, they will know the most prescient issues.
That's a little bit misleading. It would be up to the delegates to the convention, not the state legislatures.
Thank you. So I think that what we're going to see when the convention is called is that there's great difficulty coming to agreement on very many issues. There are going to be some core issues that I think most believe are of preeminence right now. One is balanced budget or something akin to that, to reduce the scope, the fiscal scope of the federal government. Term limits, definitely for Congress, maybe for the judiciary, hard to say. And some other type of amendment that has to do with federal regulations and the federal bureaucracy in terms of a way to neuter it, if you will, for lack of a better word, to reduce it. That's me speculating based on my readings, okay? That's not a COS position per se. Convention of States approach, and I'm sure Jim's already touched on it, just to reiterate, our approach is to say to the state legislatures and the delegates that they send that you will know best at that time what is needed, but there's a singular goal, and that's reducing the size and scope of the federal government. And it all goes back to what Jim just said a minute ago about the aggregation or concentration of power.
Okay.
We want to take it the other way because we realize power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Okay, so you should have been.
Well, before we start that, if you could stay out of there's two cameras over here. One of them is live broadcasting this, and the other one is recording it. We need to either, if we could like maybe stand back here and if people have a question, as far as giving the mic to them.
They can pass it back and forth.
And if she could repeat the question for the viewers and the recording.
Okay. My question was a two-part question, and it was, can we keep it to one amendment that forces the federal government to the 17 delegated enumerated powers? And what form of punishment is there going to be for those that do not follow it, as they are not following it now?
Yes, that's interesting. I've not, we've looked at nearly 100 proposed amendments out there, some from the left, some from the right, some from the nether regions. I've not seen one that suggested we put them back inside the enumerated powers box. They talk about limiting, it's like Councilor Fye said, the balanced budget amendment, and there's been other constitutional scholars and attorneys said, you do this balanced budget amendment, and you're going to do away with the restrictions of the enumerated powers, and it will authorize them to fund anything as long as the budget is balanced. And they'll balance it on your backs. As far as Mr. Lyons? Mr. Lyons suggested that they were going to limit the scope of the amendments with their application. Their model application for an Article 5 convention will be limited. But the Convention of States Staff Council says it's not. If you go to youtube.com/Patriot Watchdog and watch the Yorktown Article 5 debate, and in fact the title is Convention of States admits that their application is not limited. And Mr. Kelly, he went through, yes, Article 1's on the table, Article 2's on the table, Article 3, Article 5. It's not limited. And how do you hold them accountable? It all comes back to the people in the mirror.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Next question.
I was wondering if, as we talk here, everybody asked, what can we do to hold our elected officials accountable? I understand there's a process out there called the Board of Quo Warranto, and I think it's a board of people getting together, and if they find a elected official who is not upholding the Constitution, it's a way to hold them accountable. Is that a viable solution for any elected official in North Carolina or the United States? And if not, what can we do to hold them accountable? What is the process? Because everybody says, well, we got to hold them accountable. Well, how do we do that?
Well, yes and no. That probably isn't a valid position, and there's the groups that promote some of that stuff are not, they're more anarchist than otherwise. But we do what they happened in Colorado. They pulled 3 representatives out of office because they lied to them. They didn't commit a crime, they lied to the citizens. The citizens did a recall on them and kicked their butts out of office. That's what we do. And a lot of states have recall. If they don't, you need to change your constitution, the state constitution, and give you the right of recall. So you can kick everybody out from the governor to the dog catcher. and you need to have the right for referendum and initiative. So if they vote to accept more federal dollars, you can do a referendum and pull it back. Or you can pass, by initiative, the citizens can pass a bill to tell their state government, don't do this, whatever, get control.
I understand the concern. One of the things that we think will happen in our limited scope, we're not going after everything that happens out there, but in trying to make a convention of states a viable option for reining in the federal government. We're building out a grassroots organization that will be contacting their legislators and will be letting their voices be heard. And it's the cumulative effect of a number of voices. A congressman or a senator or a legislator gets 1 or 2 calls or gets an email, that they might note it, they might not, depending upon how concerned they are about the issue. But when they get 10, they get a dozen, they get 15, they get emails, they get phone calls, all of a sudden you have their attention. And we believe that the organization we're trying to build out, in the instance of the convention states, will be one of those tools that we can hold them accountable to send the application for, we can hold them accountable in selecting delegates, we can hold them accountable in the ratification process. And that's where we see the accountability from what the convention of states is trying to do.
Thanks. Next question.
Can I have 10 seconds?
No.
I'm taking it. This term limits thing, it doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican, the second term, when they know they can't run again, look at the president, it's a lame duck, that lame duck session, lame duck presidency. You'll make every public servant their first term, when your term limits, and you're going to give them 1 term with 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, it's lame duck. The starting gun starts right then. They know I've got 6 years to get done what the people that sent me here want done. And they know they don't have to worry about a second election because you done told them they've only got 1. It won't change anything until we change the people that are in those offices. And that won't happen until we change how we vet them and how we become them.
You want to respond?
Yeah, I agree that the election process is pretty critical, but I also believe that term limits helps, because here's what happens when we term limit. Instead of seniority rating, merit reigns. So the best ideas, the best legislators, the people with the energy and the enthusiasm will rise to the top, instead of it being the guys that have been there 50 years and all their old ideas and all their worn out stuff and all their clinging to power. So I believe that people like Ryan from Wisconsin and others who are young and vigorous and just getting on board will have an opportunity to rise sooner when they have good ideas. You make the legislature a meritocracy instead of a seniority-based system.
Okay, thanks. Next question.
Okay. Since the Federal Reserve can print money, and which will affect inflation, which makes it difficult to balance a budget, do you believe that the Federal Reserve should be eliminated and we switch to a precious metal money system in order for the balanced budget amendment to be successful?
I'll let Gary answer part of this. The first answer is we're not supporting any particular amendment at this point. We're pushing to get the convention states in place. I believe that would be something that would be discussed, whether it would gather the support in the convention to go to the states, and whether it could get 38 states to make it a part of the Constitution about the management of the money system here in America, the currency, is a different question. I think we all agree that the ability to just run mindlessly 24 hours a day, the print plant, is not the way to manage the currency.
Right, and then point of clarification, you probably know this just so the others understand, we don't need an amendment to get rid of the Federal Reserve. We can just repeal the Federal Reserve Act.
I just was wondering the view of the people that are supporting it
Okay.
on that issue.
But yeah, I'm just saying, as far as the broader context, we don't need an amendment. Congress can do that whenever they want. I mean, if there's enough pressure, they can do that. You have a minute for this question?
What did I just tell you?
I don't know. It was about the Federal Reserve.
What did I just tell you?
I want to respond to another quick point, though. Look, over 80% of the people didn't want Obamacare, and we got Obamacare. So phone calls don't matter. And I've been on that. I've advocated. I go to state capitals and advocate. Sometimes it doesn't matter. I've lost legislation where there are 300 to 1 calls in favor of it, and it still was voted down because of the parties. And the other thing is, I don't know how it works here, but in Kansas, it's not the people in office that put the people in office. It's the GOP party boys and the Democrat party boys that put them in office. So they're the ones that control it. It's not the politicians themselves. So that doesn't do any good. And what they're really telling us is, if you want to find out what's in this convention, we've got to trigger it to find out what's in it. And they're telling us, you know, you can keep your liberty if you want it. We're just going to change your constitution. We've heard that stuff before, and we shouldn't be taking that bait.
You recall what Speaker Pelosi said about the Affordable Care Act. Well, we need to pass it to find out what's in it, away from the debate. Do we need to wait to find out what's in these proposed amendments that will come out of an Article 5 convention? We got to trigger it to find out what's in it. The 17th Amendment, the states gave away their seat at the table in Congress. We wouldn't have a runaway budget if the states had their seat at that table. They enjoy their limited responsibility and limited accountability, because right now when we come to Raleigh, they say, well, it's not our job, the federal government did it to us.
Thanks. Since they went over, you have time to respond.
Just a couple things. The Obamacare is an aberration. 2008, these blessed voters gave the Democrats the House, the Senate, a veto-proof majority in the Senate, and presidency. And they pushed that through with all kinds of illegal, after-the-fact bribes and everything else to make it happen. And in 2010, they paid a price. The House came back to the Republicans. The Senate was much more split. They no longer could just do their will without at least some bipartisan support, or they didn't have a veto-proof majority. We still have the same president. So the people do have a voice, and the people do make a difference. We just made a terrible mistake in 2008, not simply, I think, in the election of the president that we have, but in the way that the Senate races and the House races unfolded that year, to give him almost an unrestricted voice in what happened, and he took advantage of that with the $1 trillion stimulus package and Obamacare. He hasn't accomplished much since. Thank you, Tea Party, for stepping up and turning the House and putting some additional voices in the Senate.
Thanks. Is there another question?
Yeah, I came here kind of with an open mind, because and I'm still not convinced either way, so you guys can do your jobs. But I think we all agree in this room that our system is broken, severely broken. And how we fix it is a question. I don't see elections as the solution, because the election system is rigged in favor of the establishment parties, and a con would be the same thing. So my radical question, since I'm the resident libertarian in the room, is the United States of America too big? And is it time that we maybe did have another Constitutional Convention and think of a better way of running the nation or nations?
You want to go first?
I'm sorry, we were talking, what was the last part of his question? I apologize.
Because he basically said because he's a libertarian, no one likes him. And,
We love you. We love you.
Everybody knows me.
no one likes him, and he believes elections, trying to get people to hold their oath of office, he implied, has not worked. He does not believe in Article 5 convention, which he called the Constitutional Convention, which obviously would be a convention to amend the Constitution, will not work. Therefore, his question is, both sides obviously will respond, should we have an actual convention whose set purpose from the get-go would be to give us a new compact, a new constitution.
Very interesting. When you use the term Constitutional Convention, that's what you're asking for. We don't use the term Constitutional Convention. This is the Convention of States. Constitutional Convention convenes outside the authority of the existing Constitution for the purposes of replacing it. That's not what the Convention of States convenes under the authority of the existing Constitution for the purpose of amending it. So it's two different approaches. You're supporting a constitutional convention, essentially, which would be a convention organized outside the authority of the existing Constitution, outside the authority of the existing government, essentially put together by the people. That's a very rare situation to be able to create. It happened in when we won the Revolutionary War. We had a free blackboard that we could do, and then they came back and discovered it didn't quite get it right, and they had pretty much carte blanche in 1786 and 87 to fix it. But I don't know how you get back to a situation where you could just bypass the existing legislative system, the existing Constitution, to get the authority to have a constitutional convention replace the existing government.
We're against it.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're against
flat
that.
opposed to it.
I'm
Yeah, we're
posing a
opposed to it.
rhetorical question.
Yeah.
And the answer to the question of how we get to it is that's how we started. We basically overthrew the existing form of government to establish this country to begin with.
Right,
Well,
so to clarify, I just want to expedite, I'll give you all the time in the world. He's basically saying he rejects both sides. He doesn't believe an Article 5 convention is going to work. He doesn't believe the current system will be fixed under the current Constitution. So to clarify what you're basically saying, you're not open to, you don't think that third option would work.
We're not for a we're not for a constitutional convention. I think you're proposing armed revolt.
I'm not proposing
You're seeing that unfold right now in Nevada.
I'm asking a rhetorical question for purposes of discussion, since we all agree in this room that the system is broken. How do we fix the system?
That's a different question. It's, are you open to a constitutional convention? So just expedite it, Brian. Just, are you open, yes or no? Will that work? Could the current political atmosphere, environment we have, would you be open to a constitutional convention to rewrite the whole compact? Would that work, yes or no?
You didn't pigeonhole.
I did. I did at the end. And then they said no. So it's really a yes or no question.
Well, it's not. It's not. They did say no today, but on September 4th, 2013, Mr. Kinney himself referred to it as a constitutional convention. That we can mince words as whether we're talking about a constitutional convention. We're using that term to abolish an existing government and create a new one. We can use it in the amendments convention to modify an existing convention. The Declaration of Independence said alter or abolish. The Convention of States has said in other forms that if Congress won't call it, if they get this application and Congress still won't call it a convention, and the Congressional Research Service has said there's no way to force them to. Convention of States has said that we'll hold it anyway. We'll call our own convention if Congress won't call it. Well, if they did that, that would be outside the purview of Article 5, because Article 5 is application by the states for a convention for proposing amendments to the existing Constitution. It's not to rewrite it. It's if Congress won't do that, they do say in other forms that the states do have that authority to call one on their own. And in that instance, yes, they do, because the states do have the sovereign authority that we, the people of North Carolina, for example, have given them on our behalf. But in today's climate, with the dumbing down of America and the lack of understanding of the principles of liberty, which are timeless, I don't trust them. I don't trust them to take out the trash.
Okay. Next question.
Well,
And the system's not broken. We, the people, are broken.
Citizens are feeling a lot of fear.
This is he referred to something I said in September 4, 2013. First of all, I wasn't a member of Convention of States then. I was writing editorials and producing them on the radio, and I had a misunderstanding of the terminology, quite frankly. I didn't understand the distinction between a constitutional convention and a convention of states. That's what I've made the distinction here today so that you can understand the difference. That was the ignorant Jim. This is the less ignorant.
I wouldn't belabor the point, but I know that some people that support an Article 5 convention want to say it's not a constitutional convention, but it is in the sense you are convening a convention to amend the Constitution, and we've never had one, so at one level it is constitutional convention for taking it. I mean, just as far as the nomenclature. Next question.
Citizens are feeling a lot of fear and panic about a runaway, out of control federal government. For Mr. Lewis, is this what is driving their interest in an Article 5 convention?
I couldn't hear you very well. Could you repeat with the microphone a little closer from the beginning?
Citizens are feeling a lot of fear and panic about our runaway, out of control federal government. Is that what is driving their interest in an Article 5 convention?
Mr. Kinney stuck around the Navy long enough to retire as a captain, and and I spent almost 10 years in myself, a Gulf War veteran. I know, we both know about fear, and we both know that fear is a good thing. Fear will keep you alive. And what we see today is panic. People are panicking, and when you panic, panic gets you killed. And panicking and rushing to this Article 5 convention is playing Russian roulette, except instead of only one bullet chamber, there's only one chamber empty. There is nothing to gain from an amendments convention that we can't solve with the existing Constitution if we would hold our state and local public servants accountable to their oath. The burden's on us, folks. The founder said that people get a government they deserve. We deserve the government we've got right now because we won't hold ourselves accountable. We're not a moral and religious people. If this Republican, constitutional republic that we have will not survive without morality and without religion, without upholding our timeless Judeo-Christian principles. We've got to change ourselves before we can change anything about our government.
Okay.
Anything else is a fool's errand.
Okay.
You know, he was talking there about we've got to get our local officials right, state officials right, and I couldn't agree with him more. And I think over the last several election cycles, we have seen, in many states, not all states, but we've seen an improvement in the type of individuals that have been elected. I'm not going to say that the majority are statesmen, but I think that more and more are. These are people who really want to serve their country. The problem is that the federal government is so powerful that their hands are largely tied. I mean, in my conversations with legislators here in North Carolina, they lament that the greater and greater percentage of our state budget is being essentially dictated by the feds. And what's going to happen eventually is their entire budget will be dictated by the feds. And guess what that means? They're out of a job. They don't do anything. They'll just rubber stamp it. Look at Nevada. Look at what's going on right now with the whole incident with this cattle rancher out there. Okay? You've got the feds coming in, the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, basically trying to dictate to this poor rancher, he can do this, he can't do this, you know, on and on and on and on. I imagine he's appealed to some of his the state authorities there. Don't hold me to that. I'm hoping he has. But the fact of the matter is, when the feds come in, like the feds can come in, there isn't a whole lot that can be done. So we need something much more significant than nipping around the edges.
Thanks. Got time for about one more question? No. You said one each. You went first?
I don't know how you use I don't know how you use this thing, but
Pull the record.
okay. I want to pull a little seniority here if I'm allowed to. This will be my 65th year of voting, and I started when you had to be 21, not 18, so I think I outdate most of you. If you ask me if I have faith that this will work, this Amendment 5, I really don't. I don't think there's a guarantee with anything you do. But I think this has a shot at making it. It's probably 50-50 if I were going back to my poker days. But about the other way, I keep hearing this, the system works, we just have to make it work. Well, this is 65 years I've heard this, and it's going nowhere but down. If I were a plotting man, I would plot this and we would be headed for a crash quite soon. And I hear nothing from the other side except it's up to us. Well, it's been up to us for 65 years for me, and I'm getting nowhere.
Okay. Sir, what's your question, please?
My question is, how do you accomplish this, seeing that it gets done? I mean pragmatically, not philosophically about, we just see that the people do what they're supposed to do. It hasn't worked, as far as I know, for 65 years. What do you know that I don't know that'll make it work?
May I make a suggestion that you attend some of our Constitution classes and activation classes that we have to get people involved. This afternoon will be an example of this. How do we vet candidates? April Major is running for the Senate in North Carolina. She's consented to fill out the forms, to follow the questions. How do we pick out what we call 3C candidates? Constitutional, conservative, Christian, inspired.
You'll get,
And
you'll get the same people that you get here.
Uh,
You've got to get the 50 or 60% that know
So yeah, I
nothing.
get it. That's the ones we're after, and that's what we do in the small meetings. In these meetings, no, you don't get them. But in the small meetings where I go around and where you have people come in, you only get a half a dozen. And I remember about 2,000 years ago, the 12 men changed the world.
Yeah.
And it didn't take a lot, but it takes some people with some guts and determination, faith, and courage. And that's what we need to develop.
So, Don, do you want to give the panelists the chance to respond to his question?
In a little while. Okay. Go ahead.
You bypassed the program.
Well, I'm co-moderator, and I haven't said a thing so far. So
You go at the end.
Oh, okay. I thought this was, you said the last question.
Right, but they didn't answer.
Oh, go ahead and answer, then I'll pick up.
Sir, this is a Dr. Pepper can, but let's assume for a moment that this contained penicillin. But you didn't know the benefits of penicillin as an antibiotic, fighting off infection. This is penicillin. If I walk by this and don't know, and I'm sick, and I don't know that what's in here could make me well again, I might walk right on by it. If I see somebody trying to crush this, and I don't have any value in it, because I don't see anything in it that's any good, I'm not going to try and stop them from crushing it or pouring the penicillin out on the ground. We've stopped teaching the principles of liberty. We've stopped teaching the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that was put into place. And until we instill in people a value in learning this and then defending it, nothing will change.
Okay.
I asked for a fraction. You're a patriot. Nobody here has voted for 65 years. I understand your frustration, and I agree with you. I don't know that this will work. I don't know if this will work, but here's where I'm going with this. Every once in a while when we're in the job up there, all 8 of us that are on this huge, humongous machine that's trying to destroy America, we feel like we're just slogging away. We're just head down trying to make stuff happen. Every time that happens, I remind them, you know what slog stands for? What we're about is so large, only God can ultimately accomplish it. I don't know what God's mind is, whether America has